You are standing on a sidewalk in America. Maybe it is Manhattan, where steam rises from a striped stack in the middle of the street and a delivery bike threads between yellow cabs. Maybe it is Chicago in February, where the pavement has cracked from freeze and thaw, and the curbs are stained white with salt. Maybe it is Los Angeles after the first hard rain in months, when water rushes along the gutter carrying oil, brake dust, palm leaves, and everything the city dropped during the dry season. Or maybe it is a quiet subdivision outside Atlanta or Phoenix, where the lawns are trimmed, and the only sign that another world exists below is a round metal cover set into the asphalt. You look around, and you think you are seeing the city. Buildings, traffic. The city that keeps you alive is underneath. Below your shoes, there is another map. Water mains and sewer lines. Storm drains and gas pipes. Electrical conduits, steam tunnels, subway tubes, fiber optic cables, vaults, valves, pump stations, and the foundations of everything above. It does not look like a city. It looks like a nervous system, and most of the time, you never see it. That is the whole point. You turn a handle, and clean water arrives. You flush, and dirty water leaves. You cross an intersection after a thunderstorm, and the street is not a river. Modern life depends on that lack of wonder. The surface has to feel simple, so the underground has to absorb the complexity. Every American city has two versions: the one people photograph and the one people maintain. This is the story of the second one, the hidden city. Water. Somewhere in a kitchen this morning, a hand turns a faucet, fills a coffee pot, and turns it off again, without a single thought. Nobody applauds. Nobody says the aqueduct worked today. Nobody thanks the pump station. The water is just there. That is what infrastructure does when it succeeds. It turns enormous engineering into something so reliable it becomes invisible. But invisible is not the same as simple. Consider New York. The water that rinses a coffee mug in a queen's apartment may have begun as rain falling on forests up to 125 miles to the north. The city draws its drinking water from a watershed of roughly 2,000 square miles, an area about the size of the entire state of Delaware, spread across three great systems: the Croton, and here is the part that sounds almost impossible. Almost all of that water moves to the city by gravity alone. No giant pumps for most of the journey, just the patient downhill pull of the land, engineered across a century. Around 1.1 billion gallons arrive every single day, for roughly half the population of New York State. About 90% of it is never even filtered. It is so well protected at the source that it only needs disinfection. The numbers hide centuries of labor. The first piece, the old Croton Aqueduct, was completed in 1842, built largely by hand by thousands of workers, and it was considered a wonder of its age. Then came the Catskill system in the early 20th century, and the Delaware system after it. The Delaware Aqueduct, about 85 miles long, carrying roughly half the city's water, they are trusting geography. They are trusting tunnels bored before they were born, reservoirs they will never see, and workers they will never meet. They are trusting that somewhere, a valve is open, a pump is running, and the pressure is holding. Every morning in America begins with that quiet, unspoken act of faith in something underground. And most mornings, the faith is rewarded. But pipes are not immortal. A water main under a street is not just a tube, it is a promise that has to survive corrosion, soil movement, traffic vibration, tree roots, freezing winters, nearby digging, and time. Some of the mains under American cities were laid before the interstate highway system existed, sized for smaller populations and a different world. Every year, the next, water is shoving up through the asphalt, lifting the pavement, flooding basements, closing businesses, and turning an ordinary Tuesday into a local emergency. The scene is instantly recognizable. The wet trench, the backhoe, the lane closure, and a worker in a hard hat standing in a hole in the road while annoyed drivers inch past, none of them planning to think about water infrastructure today. This is not a rare event. By one widely cited study, there are on the order of 250,000 water main breaks across the United States and Canada every year. That is a buried failure roughly every couple of minutes, somewhere, all year long. A constant, invisible drumbeat of repair that the public almost never hears, because the crews usually fix it before most people notice anything more than a closed lane. The neighborhood sees an inconvenience, and that image is close to the heart of everything this story is about. The world works because someone keeps it working. Sometimes that means climbing into a hole in the street, in the cold, while everyone else is irritated that the road is closed. Now think about the other side of water, the side nobody wants to romanticize. The water that leaves. Every shower, every toilet, every dishwasher, every restaurant sink, every hospital drain, every stadium bathroom at halftime. All of it has to go somewhere. A city does not only need clean water coming in, it needs dirty water going out. And without that second system, the first one becomes meaningless. The sewer is one of the greatest inventions in the history of cities, but dense housing, public health, restaurants, schools, hospitals, and skyscrapers all quietly depend on the ability to carry wastewater away from people, reliably and out of sight. The sewer is not glamorous. It is the reason glamour can exist at all, and it is genuinely dangerous to work in. A sewer contains moving water, toxic and explosive gases, low oxygen, slick surfaces, sudden flooding, and tight confined spaces where a small mistake can be fatal. To the urban explorer, a tunnel can look like adventure. To the utility worker, it is controlled risk, entered with gas monitors, ventilation, harnesses, and training, because the underground does not forgive carelessness. None of this existed for most of human history. The hidden city had to be invented, and it was invented mostly in response to death. Human and animal filth ran in the streets and seeped into the same wells and rivers people drank from. And so the cities were swept again and again by waterborne diseases, typhoid, dysentery, and above all, cholera, which could kill a healthy person in a single day. Chicago is the clearest example, because its solution was so extreme. In the 1850s, Chicago sat barely above the level of Lake Michigan, built on swampy ground where rain had nowhere to drain. Streets turned to mud. Standing water bred disease. A cholera outbreak in 1854 killed something like 1 in 20 residents. The city finally accepted that there was no fixing this on the surface. It needed sewers, and sewers needed a downhill slope the flat land did not have. So an engineer named Ellis Chesbrough designed what is generally considered it raised the entire city. Workers laid the new sewer pipes on top of the existing ground, then buried them under fill that lifted the streets by as much as 4 to 14 feet. And then, rather than leave the buildings sunk below the new roads, they jacked the buildings up to meet them. Entire blocks of heavy masonry buildings, hotels included, were lifted into the air on hundreds of screwjacks, turned slowly by crews of workers, while business inside carried on. That is how badly a city needed its hidden systems. It was willing to lift itself off the ground to install them. And it reveals the deep logic that still governs everything beneath your feet today. Clean water in, dirty water out. Keep the two apart at all costs. Every modern city is, at its core, the pipes under the street are not a convenience. They are the reason the city is survivable at all. Here is something cities force us to forget. A city is not natural ground. it is a hard shell. Roofs, roads, parking lots, sidewalks, driveways, runways. Surfaces that do not drink water the way soil does. In a forest, rain soaks into the earth, moves through roots, and cycles slowly. In a city, rain hits asphalt and immediately starts hunting for a drain. That runoff is stormwater, and it is one of the most underestimated forces in American infrastructure. People think of water as soft. Cities have to treat it as weight. In a heavy storm, thousands of gallons can sheet down a single street in minutes, pouring into catch basins and pipes, or, when the system is overwhelmed, into basements. It is an inventory of the city. Oil, brake dust, microplastics, cigarette butts, fertilizer, fast food wrappers. Everything the streets were holding suddenly flushed toward the ocean in a single dirty surge. And in Chicago, the response to stormwater became one of the largest public works projects on Earth. Chicago sits flat and low beside Lake Michigan, and for much of its history, its sewers were combined, meaning storm runoff and raw sewage share the same pipes. As little as a third of an inch of rain could overwhelm the system and send filth pouring into the river and the lake, the city's own source of drinking water. So beginning in the 1970s, Chicago started digging the Tunnel and Reservoir Plan, known, almost mythically, as the Deep Tunnel. Around 109 miles of tunnels, when it is fully complete, it is designed to hold roughly 17 to 20 billion gallons of stormwater and sewage. A hidden buffer the size of a small sea, waiting beneath the streets for the next storm. Over 50 years, it has captured more than 1 trillion gallons that would otherwise have flooded basements and fouled the lake. Think about that contrast. On the surface, people see rain. Far below them, a system built across half a century quietly swallows a flood. And yet, in the honest spirit of this story, even the deep tunnel is not a magic fix. The biggest storms still overwhelm it, the city still floods, and engineers still debate whether it was the right answer. Infrastructure is never a finished victory. It is a constant negotiation with gravity and weather, and gravity always shows up. Now keep electricity. You never see power moving under the sidewalk. You see a light switch, a charging cable, a humming refrigerator. But in dense cities, much of the electrical system runs underground, through conduits and vaults that must be protected from water, heat, corrosion, and the careless strike of a digging machine. Hidden does not mean safe. Underground electrical equipment can flood, overheat, and even explode. A manhole cover blown into the air by an underground fault is a violent reminder that the street is not solid, that beneath the pavement are chambers full of cable, heat, and pressure, doing work every second. Gas. In much of America, natural gas still flows under the streets and into homes. The stove flame, the furnace, the water heater that makes a house in Ohio survivable in January. That is why old lines matter. Why a faint smell near a basement becomes a 911 call. Why crews walk the streets with detection equipment. Buried gas pipes serve daily life by doing one thing perfectly: staying contained. And then there is steam, the strangest layer of all, and one most people never think about. That cloud rising from a tall, striped pipe in a Manhattan street is not movie atmosphere. It is the visible breath of a real system. New York has carried steam beneath its streets since 1882, and today, Con Edison runs the largest district steam system in the world, larger than the next 5 American systems combined. Roughly 105 miles of pipe and some 3,000 steam manholes carry heat from a handful of plants to well over 1,000 buildings. On a cold day, millions of pounds of steam at around 350 degrees move through those pipes every hour. The familiar orange and white stacks on the street are placed wherever water has seeped in and met the steam to vent it safely. Because steam, too, can turn violent. In 2007, an aging steam pipe near Grand Central exploded, killing one person and sending a scalding plume dozens of stories into the air. The cloud that tourists photograph as a charming detail is, in truth, a sign that the city below is hot, pressurized, and very much alive. With so many systems packed into the same ground, the underground becomes three-dimensional politics. Water needs space. Sewers need a downhill slope. Gas needs distance for safety. Electricity needs protection. Telecom needs a path. This is why opening a street is never just digging dirt. It is entering history. A pipe from 1920 may cross a conduit from 1975, which runs beside fiber installed last decade, next to a gas line, under pavement patched after some older repair nobody documented well. Maps may be incomplete. Old utilities may not be where anyone expects. The ground beneath a city is not a clean diagram. It is a negotiation between centuries. Which is why, before a crew digs, a language appears on the pavement. You have seen it. Bright spray paint, lines, arrows, and letters that look like graffiti to a pedestrian. To workers, it is a warning code, standardized across the country. Red marks electric. Yellow marks gas, oil, or steam. Orange marks communications. Blue marks drinking water. Green marks. Behind that paint is an entire safety system. In the United States, before you dig, you are meant to call a single national number, 811. And utilities send locators to mark what lies beneath, because a backhoe bucket cannot tell the difference between soil and a fiber optic cable until the damage is already done. A struck gas line can level a building. A cut power cable can kill. A severed fiber line can knock out service for an entire district. The markings on the street are not random. They are the visible alphabet of the hidden city. And what they are quietly saying is, the ground here is full. Be careful. Because the ground beneath a city is not empty, and it is not new. It is full of decisions, some brilliant, some cheap, some long forgotten. Temporary fixes that quiet. Every city is built on top of its own earlier versions. So when a crew opens a street, they sometimes find the past staring back. Old streetcar rails, paved over and forgotten when the lines were torn out. In some cities, water pipes made of hollowed wooden logs, laid in the 18th or 19th century and still sitting there, occasionally still holding water. Sealed vaults, bricked up tunnels, foundations of buildings that burned down 100 years ago. The underground is not just infrastructure. It is an archive of every era the city has lived through, stacked in layers under the same intersection. But unlike, you have to run the city through its own history, threading new fiber past century-old mains, splicing modern systems onto Victorian ones, building the future inside the narrow space the past left behind. That is the real work of modern infrastructure. It is almost never building on a blank slate. It is a long, unfinished argument between generations, conducted in the dark, beneath a street where someone on the surface is honking because a lane is closed. We like to imagine that the most modern parts of our lives have escaped all of this, that data lives in a weightless cloud. It does not. The cloud is one of the great illusions of the age. Your phone is wireless, so the internet feels wireless. But the signal from your phone travels only a short hop before it hits something physical. Your bank login, your video call, your child's online homework, your hospital records. All of it rides through cables, many of them threaded through ducts beneath the same sidewalks, buried along the same highways and rail lines, and across the floors of oceans. The cloud is not in the sky. It is in buildings full of humming machines, fed by substations and cooled by water, rooted in land and electricity and dirt. Even the most abstract corners of the modern economy eventually come down to a physical cable in the ground, and part of that body, too, lies under your feet. And then there is the layer you can actually walk into. In New York, Washington, Boston, Chicago, and beyond, the subway is a second street system running beneath the first. It is not just transportation. It is platforms, tunnels, signals, ventilation, power rail. As a rider, you only ever see the public layer. The stairs, the turnstile, the platform, the train. Behind the locked doors are rooms that keep the whole thing alive. And the most relentless enemy down there is not crime or crowding. It is water. Water is always trying to get into the subway. Groundwater seeps through the tunnel walls every hour of every day, which is why New York's system runs hundreds of pumps that remove something like 13 million gallons of water on a dry, sunny day with no rain at all. The subway is not naturally dry. It is kept dry every single day by machines and the people who tend them. And when those defenses are overwhelmed, the consequences are enormous. In 2012, Hurricane Sandy drove a storm surge of. The head of the transit authority said the 108-year-old subway had never faced a disaster so devastating in its entire history. One station near the southern tip of Manhattan was so badly destroyed that restoring it took years and hundreds of millions of dollars. A subway flood is never only a transit problem. When the underground floods, it takes mobility, signals, power, and schedules with it, and through them, the work, the hospitals, the schools, and the daily rhythm of millions of people. Because the underground is where the systems all meet. And when systems meet, failure travels. It is tempting to think all of this is a downtown problem, a matter of dense old cities with steam pipes and subways. But the hidden city is just as real under the quietest suburb, and there it may be even more revealing. But under that calm surface runs an expensive and entirely dependent network. Water lines reach every house. Sewer or septic systems carry the waste away. Storm drains manage the runoff. Gas lines feed the furnaces. Electrical lines power the air conditioning. Fiber turns a spare bedroom into an office. The suburb feels private and self-sufficient. It is neither. A cul-de-sac is not isolated. It is plugged in to systems that stretch for miles and to maintenance that lasts forever. And this is where growth hides its true cost. When a developer builds a new neighborhood, the brochure shows the kitchens, the schools, the parks, the commute times. It never shows the buried bill. But every new subdivision is also new water mains, new sewer lines, new storm drains, new pump stations, new electrical service, new fiber. The more a country builds, the more it has to keep alive. Growth is not just construction. It is the quiet creation of maintenance that someone, somewhere, will be paying for and performing a century from now. That is why the most important infrastructure is often the most ordinary looking. A retention pond behind a big box store. A pump station beside a bike path. A storm drain at the low point of a cul-de-sac. A fenced gray building with no sign except authorized personnel only. These are not landscaping. They are organs. The city has organs everywhere, some enormous, some small. And they are beautiful round covers, square covers, grates, vault lids. Each one is a door. A manhole cover is a small, deliberate piece of industrial design, and what it says is simple. Access is needed here. Someone, eventually, will have to go down to inspect, repair, clear, measure, replace, or rescue some part of the system below. The city leaves doors in its own streets because the underground can never be sealed and forgotten. It is not a time capsule. It is a working machine, and a working machine has to be reached and tended and fixed forever. This is the mistake almost everyone makes about infrastructure. We treat construction as the main event. A bridge opens, a tunnel is finished, a water main is laid, a new line begins service. A politician cuts. Every system that gets built becomes a permanent promise to future workers. If you bury a pipe, someone will inspect it for a century. If you install a valve, someone will eventually have to find it and turn it. If you open a tunnel, someone will light it, drain it, ventilate it, and patrol it for as long as the city stands. The doors in the street are the physical proof that the work is never actually finished. And so much of that endless work runs through the most underrated machines in all of civilization: pumps. They have none of the romance of cranes, the violence of bulldozers, or the elegance of bridges. But they are everywhere beneath us, and they never stop. They move drinking water and lift wastewater. They drain tunnels and keep basements dry. And here is the pattern that runs through the whole hidden city. The more important a system is, the more completely it vanishes when it is working. You do not notice the pump until the morning it fails. You do not think about the catch basin until the storm it cannot handle. You do not picture the sewer until it backs up. The underground earns its silence by succeeding. So imagine for a moment a morning when several of these systems fail together. Not an apocalypse, just ordinary plausible failures stacking up. A water main bursts under a busy avenue. A storm drain, clogged before the rain, sends water into basements. A pump station loses power. A gas leak closes a few blocks. Construction slices a fiber line, and traffic signals go dark. Suddenly, the city above discovers exactly how much it was. The hospital switches to backup protocols. Businesses lose their connections. Drivers pour into gridlock around the closures. And people ask the same question they always ask: how did this happen? The answer is almost never one thing. It is age, and pressure, and weather, and funding, and design, and deferred maintenance, and human error, and time. All meeting at one intersection on one bad morning. Because the underground city is where time accumulates. A 19th century sewer may still serve a 21st century neighborhood. A storm system designed for one century's rainfall now faces another's. Every buried thing carries the assumptions of the moment it was built. And the present has to keep living inside those assumptions, or rebuild them while the city above. The hidden city has a hidden workforce, and their work is some of the most demanding and least visible in the country. There are the locators, who walk the streets with detectors before any digging, painting the warning code onto the pavement so a backhoe does not strike a gas line. There are the confined space crews, who descend into sewers and vaults with gas monitors and harnesses, because the air down there can be deadly and the water can rise without warning. There are line workers who handle underground power and gas crews who chase the faint smell of a leak before it becomes an explosion, and pump station operators who watch. In New York, men known as sandhogs have spent entire careers boring the city's water tunnels hundreds of feet beneath the streets, including a third Great Water Tunnel that has been under construction, on and off, since 1970, one of the largest and longest-running public works projects in the city's history. They work in cramped, wet, high-pressure conditions, drilling and blasting through solid rock, building the very arteries that will carry the city's water long after they are gone. Over the decades, that work has cost lives. The water that will someday pour, unremarkably, from a faucet was carved out of bedrock by people most of the city will never know existed. Almost all of this happens out of sight, much of it at night, when the surface can least afford to be disturbed, or far below ground, where no one is watching. There are no statues. The system is designed to be invisible, and so, inevitably, are the people who keep it running. They are, in the most literal sense, the people holding the city up from underneath. There is a reason all of this is so easy to ignore, and so hard to fund. A new project has a picture. Maintenance prevents a picture. When a water main is replaced before it bursts, there is no flooded street on the news. When a pump is fixed before the storm, there is no dramatic rescue. When a catch basin is cleared before the rain, nobody thanks the crew, because the road simply does not flood. Good maintenance produces non-events: a basement that stayed dry, a tunnel that did not fill, a gas line that did not leak, a street that remained, quietly, a street. And non-events are almost impossible, and they are produced every day by people who work in the least visible parts of the city. Water technicians and sewer crews, pump station operators and transit maintainers, electricians, gas crews, telecom crews, inspectors, and engineers. The people in reflective vests standing around a hole in the street while a driver mutters that they are always working on this road. And sometimes they are always working on that road, not from incompetence, but because the system is always aging. Because water freezes and expands. Because roots invade pipes, and metal corrodes, and old maps are wrong. Because every new building adds demand, and every paved-over field sends its rain somewhere else. The city you can see keeps changing the city you cannot. Infrastructure is not a statue, it is a body. And bodies need circulation, drainage, repair, and care, or they fail. It runs because, right now, someone is keeping it running. The ribbon cutting is never the end of the story. It is the beginning of a maintenance obligation that has no end. If you build a pipe, someone will inspect it. If you bury a cable, someone will locate it. If you open a tunnel, someone will drain it, light it, ventilate it, and repair it, for as long as the city exists. So the next time you walk down an American street, look down. Look at the manhole covers and the storm grates, the patched squares of asphalt, the steam drifting from a striped stack, the bright paint and the orange cones around a cut in the road. They are not random, and they are not ugly accidents. They are messages. They are the surface signs of a second city pressing up against the first, telling you that water is moving, waste is leaving. You will not know the age of the pipe beneath your shoes, or which pump station protects your commute, or which buried tunnel swallowed the flood that never reached your door. But the city knows. The city remembers through maintenance, and tomorrow morning, when someone fills a glass in Queens, flushes a toilet in Chicago, drives through a dry underpass in Houston, or walks across a quiet suburban street after a night of hard rain, the hidden city will be there again, doing its work in the dark, carrying the water in, taking the water out, swallowing the storm, holding the wires, absorbing the past, quietly protecting the fragile thing we call normal. You will step over a metal cover without looking. You will keep walking. And somewhere below you, the second city will keep running. Not because it was built once, but because someone never stopped keeping it alive. If every pump under your city switched off for a single day, what do you think would flood first? Share your answer in the comments.